Well, got the painting done, at least the majority of it. Still got to do the block and I-beams, of course, but trim around the garage doors a little bit. But most of it's done. Got the ceiling done. Of course, the last update I had shop area done. And pretty happy with how it turned out. Like I mentioned, I think on the last video talking about the shop, I think it looked pretty good for how much effort it was compared to drywall. And yeah, you get in person, you can tell there's some imperfections. And the biggest thing you notice is that seam around the top, just from where I had to use 8-foot tall sections of plywood, and there was about 33 inches above that. And yeah, I looked for 12-foot, like 4x12 plywood, and nobody sold it. I thought it'd been nice just take it all the way to the ceiling and cut off about 1.5 feet. But so I didn't have much choice but to do that, and it's just, you know, you do the best you can to get that to align, but each board's a little wavy and they don't quite line up. Some of them line up better than others, but that's the only thing that really catches your eye. And, you know, there's like little imperfections like there. You know, I filled that in with caulking, and it doesn't catch your eye as much, but if you look close, you can see it. But again, like I've always said, it's a garage. It'll be filled with junk and dirty and everything else in a year or two. So don't want to spend too much time trying to get it perfect like I would have with drywall and mud and all that stuff. Let's see, I don't know what to talk about too much on it. I guess the ceiling is a little bit of a challenge. It's pretty high up, 12 feet, and it's a couple different options. Staying on the scaffolding and just roll it by hand, or work from the ground with a pole. And I tried both ways, and I eventually found that just working from the ground with a pole is better. Because, it's kind of tough working with just one hand, trying to roll it like that versus having your whole body working the pole. So it's less tiring on your hand like that. And then two, you don't have to worry about moving the scaffolding constantly. You just work it all from the ground. And but it's every time you need some paint, you gotta come all the way down to the bottom, roll it on a 10-foot pole all the way back up to the top. And so it's just slow going. And but anyway, got it done. I think I looked at the calendar. I think it took me about 2.5 weeks of busting it. So weekends, go nonstop on it, evenings after work. I think I took a vacation day to work on it one day, and get up first thing in the morning, get an hour or two done before work, just picking away at it for 2.5 weeks to get it done. So, well, I guess you could say maybe a little faster than I expected, but also because we busted it out here. I don't know why I'm saying we, it's pretty much me. I didn't have much help on this piece of it, but that's all right. It's pretty much a one-person job. I mentioned in the last video that I was happy that I got that coated in 2 coats, one coat of primer and then 1 coat of paint, because if I had to do another coat, that was going to make the job 50% more time and money. Well, what I found was that I didn't realize so much in this section, but on the walls with that second coat, you could still kind of see through it a little bit. Once I started doing these bigger sections, I could tell, you could see the knots, the grain in the wood a little bit, kind of the darkness, I guess, of the plywood shining through in some places. So I realized I was probably going to need to do a 3rd coat at least on the walls. And so I went back and did a 3rd coat in here and another one in here. So ended up having 3 coats on the wall, more like 2.5, because that second coat was just kind of quick and just kind of rough. Maybe a little thinner than the other coats, but just something to give it one more layer. And really, if you look at it sometimes, it probably wouldn't hurt to have one more, but I'm definitely not going to do that at this point. The ceiling is kind of in the same boat. What I found is it probably wouldn't hurt to have another coat on it, but the nice thing about it is where it's above the lights, it's kind of got a shadow above it, and you don't notice any of that. So I think if you shone a flashlight up there, you'd notice that it wouldn't hurt to have another coat, but just the way the shadow is, it doesn't matter. And that ceiling was the hardest thing to paint, so I'm definitely not going to do a 3rd coat on it. But I guess I can talk about the lights real quick. Nothing too exciting to say about those in terms of hanging them. I got a little process going I made some like pieces of wood to help me measure from each one to the next. Because you got a couple different spacings. You got the space between this way, like the rows, how far from the wall, how far between each one, how far between each hook. So I just made like sticks of wood, all scrap pieces of wood, instead of trying to use a tape measure constantly, because you're trying to span the tape measure out 7 feet out and hook it on something. It's got a bow to it and it's breaking down. So using those boards made a lot of sense. But I started out with, it was close to about 6 feet between each row, including the wall. And what I realized is after I did one, didn't like how far it was away from the wall. And what ends up happening is, say they're on 6-foot centers. Well, this light's shining this way, this light's shining this way. So within 3 feet, it's got 2 lights essentially giving it light in that area. On the wall, you've got a 6-foot gap with only 1 light shining against it. So essentially this black you see right here, it would have been way further down and all this area would have been not near as lit up. So say eventually I've got, I don't know, a bench grinder back here, a parts washer. You just want to have much intensity from the light this far back. So I started over with a little bit and made it like 4 feet, I think. Yeah, about 4 feet from the wall. And then that, of course, that spreads everything out a little bit more. So it ends up being about 4 feet and then 7 feet between them is where I ended up with it. But there's so much to think through ahead of time before you start with that, if you want it to look right, because you got a lot of things to miss in here. Like for instance, really didn't want this trap door being above one of the lights. You could have done it. Every time you got to get in there, you got to take a light down, which isn't too big a deal. But it just would look nice to have it in between 2 rows. So kind of made that work out. Actually fairly centered between 2 rows. Then you got the I-beam. Didn't want it to be too close to the I-beam where it's hitting the light and kind of creating a shadow. Then had to miss this garage door, and then the little whatever supports for the tracks. And then of course you get down to the end, it's got to meet up. You want it to look right there. So I probably spent an hour, maybe 2 hours thinking through and mapping all that out, exactly how it's going to work. And every time you make a change, it throws all that off. You got to sit there, and it's hard to measure that stuff on the ceiling from how far it is from the other wall. You know, so you're sitting there eyeballing sheets of plywood. Well, this 8 feet, man, about 2 feet. You know, it's a little bit of guesswork to it. But I'm happy with the way the spacing worked out. You know, I also didn't want like get down here, shoot, I forgot about these supports. Well, I'll just offset it. Well, then you got everything matches except one light is off a foot or 2, you know. I really wanted it to match real nice, and it all did. It all, you know, start from one end to the other, everything's equal, all directions. Again, this way you got to get it spaced so that you don't get down to the end and these lights are 6 inches off the wall, and down here it's 2 feet. So, you know, all that math you got to do, which again, nothing crazy, but it's just a lot to think through. And if you get it wrong, you got to start all over. And so anyway, it all worked out just fine. The only thing I wasn't sure about, and I think I'm going to leave it the way it is, you know, I've got these switches, 3-way. So there's a whole nother set on that corner over there. But, you know, one operates the back or the shop. That operates that. And then one switch operates the front. Well, I wasn't sure if I want to do 2 rows in front of the I-beam, then all 4 behind it on one circuit, or split it up evenly. Right now I've got it split to where, you know, the front turns off 3 rows, which is 1 in front of the I-beam, and then the other one turns off the back 3 rows. And all I've got to do to convert it, like this column or this row right here, is just plug it in to the one over there. Because see, these 3 receptacles run off the back switch. Yeah, these go that way. So I could run an extension cord over and plug it in. Then you know, maybe it's a situation where most of the time you're working in the back, you got 4. Because sometimes it may be a situation where you either got to have them all on or not. You know? Whereas if I had 4 going in the back, I could probably turn off the front 2 and not need them so much. But now you're working in the back, it's pretty dim back there, so you just end up flipping them all on anyway. So I don't know. I'll play around with that over time and see what I like the best. But one thing to think about is the electricity out here. What I've found so far with my initial bills is that it's close to about 50 cents a kilowatt hour, which is pretty expensive. Because what ends up happening is, you know, I've got a separate meter for the garage, of course, and the first electricity you use is really expensive. As you start using more, the price per kilowatt hour goes down. So like on your house, my house typically runs about 17 cents a kilowatt hour. And out here, with what I've been using, it ends up averaging about 50 cents, not including the base. There's like a $12 base price every month, regardless if you use any. I'm talking about everything after that $12 is still about 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So what that means is if you got, let's just say 40 of these LEDs going, each of them 50 watts a piece. So that's 2,000 watts. That's like a space heater plus a third of a space heater running when you get all of these on. So 2,000 watts times 50 cents a kilowatt hour is $1 an hour. So when you're out here, it's $1 an hour. You go out here and work all day, 8 or 10 hours, $8 or $10, you know, just to be out here. That's just the lights. If, you know, you run a dehumidifier. I did the math on the dehumidifier. To run it all month is like $150 if it just runs nonstop, which it kind of seems to. But here's the piece of the equation I don't know yet. I haven't had a month where I've ran a bunch of electricity. So say I end up using 400 kilowatt hours, maybe that rate goes much lower, down to 20, 30 cents an hour, which is much better. So anyway, it may not be quite that, but at the rate I'm using right now, it's $1 an hour, which not the end of the world, but it's just when you're out here, it's like, my goodness, that's every hour, another $1. But what my point is that it will be nice when I'm out here. Like if you're working out front, you really don't need those on. So that right there saves 30 cents an hour. Yeah, and then maybe if you're just working on something in the front, you can turn off the back, change the oil up here, whatever. It gives me some flexibility having them on 3 switches versus if I just had everything hooked to one, where you just come in and flip them all on. No matter what you're doing, you're running $1 an hour on it. So anyway, it's just kind of a consequence of having so many of them and having it so bright out here. And again, the rate situation with my meter is what makes that so expensive, because say you had half the lights and you're at that 17 cents a kilowatt hour, like it was coming off your house, and you're down to whatever, 10, 20 cents an hour, which is much more. You don't even really worry about that, But that, to me, I guess everybody's got a different budget and outlook on money, but at $1 an hour, I just gotta be careful not to, I forgot to left the lights on overnight. Well, there's another $10 gone, And so anyway, all things to think about in the lighting, but just thought I'd go over that real quick. But my next steps are start pulling gravel through here, hopefully get the tractor over here in the next couple of days, start sending that out back. I've got to paint the block and the I-beams. I don't know when that's going to happen. I got some more pressing stuff going on, trying to get ready for a birthday party and stuff, but soon I'll be doing that. And then got the air compressor, the water situation, the deck, the piping outside. Those are kind of the main things left, and keep picking away at it this summer, and work on those things next. So it'll probably be a little while for do another update, because maybe when I get the gravel done here in a couple weeks, I'll do one, see how that went.